Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtotara Satashri A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Kota Vaishnavinda Ki Namacharya Shri Haridasa Thakur Ki Prem Singaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Ganga Maya Ki Jamuna Maya Ki Tulsi Deva Ki Bhakti Deva Ki Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Lord Chaitanya's Harinam Sankirtanam Ki Brihat Madanga Ki Srila Prabhupada Ki Shri Shri Gaurnitai Ki Shri Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ki Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada's Transcendental Book Marathon Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi, oh glorious to the assembled devotees, oh glorious to Sri Guru and Grand, oh glorious to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Sri Mate Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nivasesha Shunyavadi Vastichare Shatardine Om Gyanam Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Tapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sarvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyavicha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Oh, good morning, devotees. I hope that I can focus on this today. Half of my mind is thinking about the book marathon. We have, of course, in December, traditionally in ISKCON, during the December month, devotees try to dedicate as much energy as they can to distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, whatever way they can, honestly speaking, to distribute Prabhupada's books in many countries with the lockdown underway. That, of course, the means of distribution may be a little bit restricted or changed than normal. But in New Zealand, I think in Australia, New Zealand, there's not much problem. But in most of Europe and America and many other countries, India and so on, there are many restrictions in place in Asia, Africa, different places. But we try our best. And as Srila Prabhupada said, don't think that even if you go out and nobody gives any contribution, nobody is interested in Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada. 1968, he said like this. That's not the point. He said the point is the effort, the sincere effort that we're trying to distribute this knowledge of Krishna consciousness to others. And so Prabhupada said, Krishna accepts the effort of the devotee. So Prabhupada said, don't be disappointed by the result. It's not the result in terms of external counting numbers, but it's the result of our heart, the change of heart, the desire in our heart to share, as Krishna himself, right at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, declares that no one is more dear to me than one who preaches this Bhagavad Gita, this message of Krishna consciousness. So try to take advantage of this month if we can. It's a little extra impetus. But this morning we're carrying on with our reading from the Nectar of Instruction. And if Sikhananda Prabhu could kindly find a verse and put it on the screen there for us. Text number 2. We're going through Nectar of Instruction if you're not familiar. And we're on text number 2 today. We've been on it for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And this may be one more session after this. Let's see what happens. We're waiting for the verse to come up. In a few seconds, it should be with us. Here it is. So please repeat, or we can all chant together as you wish. I'll chant each line twice. Atyahara prayashascha, atyahara prayashascha, prajapo niyamagraha, prajapo niyamagraha, prajapo niyamagraha, janasangaschalolyam cha, janasangaschalolyam cha, Shadbir Bhakti Vinashati, Shadbir Bhakti Vinashati, Atyahara Prayashascha, Atyahara Prayashascha, Prajapo Niyamagraha, Prajapo Niyamagraha, Janasangaschalolyam cha, Janasangaschalolyam cha, Shadbir Bhakti Vinashati, Shadbir Bhakti Vinashati. And today we're reading, there are 6 points mentioned here which are can spoil our devotional service. So today we're dealing with the point Niyama Agraha, which Niyama refers to rules and regulations, and Agraha refers to too much attachment to or too much neglect of. So we read the verse. One's devotional service is spoiled when he becomes too entangled in the following 6 activities. Eating more than necessary or collecting more funds than required. Atyahara. 2, over-endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to obtain. Prayash. Overworking. 3, talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters, prajalpa. 4, practicing the scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement, or rejecting the rules and regulations of scripture and working independently or whimsically. And we discussed number 5 last week. We went out of order. 5, associating with worldly-minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness, jana sangha. And 6, being greedy for mundane achievements, which we've touched on but not covered. Lowlim. So these are the 6 activities mentioned here that we should be careful to avoid. Otherwise, they can spoil our devotional service if we become too entangled in them. We have to engage in them to a certain extent, obviously, but when we become too entangled in unnecessary talk or collecting too many funds and so on and so forth, it can be very detrimental to our devotional progress. Or associated with worldly-minded persons, we have to every day, of course, in our work or whatever, our lives, meet all kinds of different personalities, most of whom are not engaged in service to Krishna directly. So we don't become overly entangled in that association. That's the point. Or maybe we have to talk about mundane things in the course of our lives simply by course of circumstances, but we don't get overly entangled in that. It's not something we go out of our way for, so to speak. So in the purport, and this is quite a way down the purport, and I can't tell you how far down exactly, but it's a little over halfway in the purport. There's a little comment. There's not too much of a direct comment by Srila Prabhupada as far as I can see. I don't think so. But there is a comment here, there you go. You're on the right page already. Great. Accepting, Prabhupada in his purport writes about niyama agraha. He says, accepting some of the scriptural rules and regulations for immediate benefit, as utilitarians advocate, is called niyama agraha, and neglecting the rules and regulations of the Shastra, which are meant for spiritual development, is called niyama agraha. So they add up to the same word. Interesting here, Prabhupada saying, accepting some, choosing. Either way, one could say that this is a kind of a concoction based upon one's own likes and dislikes, more or less. Accepting some bona fide instructions maybe, but rejecting. In a formula, you can't just take parts of it out and only keep the part which we want. Prabhupada tells the story of the chicken philosophy, isn't it? Well, the head eats a lot, and the backside gives a lot of eggs. So let's cut the head off, and we'll just have the eggs. Well, everybody knows that won't work. So similarly, in a scriptural guidelines, we can't just take what we like, as is the modern common in our modern society to do this, to accept that which is, from our perspective, let's say, from the point of view of the material perspective, which we deem as being favorable, and reject that which we don't like. But that won't bring about the desired, the ultimate result anyway. So it's interesting, Prabhupada saying that here. And neglecting. The word agraha means eagerness to accept, and agraha means failure to accept. By the addition of either of these two words to the word niyama, rules and regulations, the word niyama agraha is formed. Thus, niyamagraha has a twofold meaning that is understood according to the particular combination of words. Those interested in Krishna consciousness should not be eager to accept rules and regulations for economic advancement. Yet they should very faithfully accept the scriptural rules and regulations for the advancement of Krishna consciousness. This is another meaning of this verse, is that accepting the rules for a mundane reason, and even for liberation. Like we were reading yesterday, Prabhupada said the desire for liberation is also a form of sense gratification. The desire for pure devotional service is not, because that is what pleases Krishna's senses. Merely liberation does not please Krishna's senses. It's engaging in devotional service which pleases Krishna. So if we have any ulterior motive for following the rules and regulations, that's another form of niyama agraha. There are many different angles to look at this. And here's two, which we've just mentioned, brought out by Srila Prabhupada in the purport here. They should strictly follow the regulated principles by avoiding illicit sex, meat eating, gambling, and intoxication. The Prabhupada, of course, is preaching as this book, Nectar of Instruction. Prabhupada mentioned in the very beginning, this book is the guideline for neophyte devotees. It's the most very important foundation for beginning devotees. So this is particularly aimed at devotees, the type of niyama or rules and regulations in every walk of life, material or spiritual, and the various kinds of material and spiritual life. There are niyamas, there are rules and regulations, which are meant to achieve whatever purpose that particular path has in mind. In every walk of life, in fact, there are different guidelines or rules are there. So definitely in Bhakti Yoga, there are rules and regulations. Although we hear there's no hard and fast rules for chanting the holy name, anyone can chant, that's a fact. But if we want to actually attain love of Godhead, there are rules and regulations to be followed. Now, today we're going to, let's see, how should we do this? First of all, what we want to do is to try to bear in mind in every endeavor, what is the objective? What is the purpose of rules and regulations? What is the purpose of the four regulated principles, for instance? What's the purpose of chanting 16 rounds? What's the purpose of ISKCON? What's the purpose of devotional service? Devotional service could be said to be the eternal characteristic or nature of the soul. But what's the purpose? At that stage, now devotional service can be divided in different ways of looking at it. We're divided up initially into two. devotional service according to so many rules and regulations based upon Shastra, based upon externals. And there are rules and regulations based upon internals also. But let's take the externals, which is basically in the category called Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Sadhana means engaging one's senses in appropriate ways to achieve one's purpose. And Vaidhi by rules and regulations, Bhakti, devotional service. Devotional service under the strictures of rules and regulations, but not concocted ones, but according to the Shastra, Guru Shastra and Sadhak directives. So this is the stage of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti at one platform. But what is the ultimate goal of that? And even in the spontaneous stage of devotional service, one may still follow rules and regulations, as Prabhupada, or rather Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that even those in knowledge act according to these rules and regulations to show others how to act, how to behave. They show the example. In the ultimate stage, the rules and regulations in our constitutional nature, when one attains perfection, are simply prema. The impetus is simply prema or love. At our stage, there may be some other motivations mixed. Devotional service, we may have many motivations driving us forward, feeling comfortable, being respected, attaining a particular objective, whatever it may be. But on the highest platform, the only motivation is prema or love for Krishna, which drives the living entity unmotivatedly, uninterruptedly in their service, because their motivation is love for Krishna. There is no other motivation other than loving Krishna. So we should remember that this, in one sense, is their ultimate goal. So I'm going to, now I don't think you can see this verse, but I'm going to read a verse from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. This is a very nice verse by Rupa Goswami. Yena tena prakarena mana Krishna niveshat sarve vidhi nishedasur etayoreva kinkaraha. So this verse deals with vidhi nisheda, rules and prohibitions mentioned in the scripture or given by the spiritual master, and also it deals with many points. I'll read the translation. One should fix his mind on Krishna by any means. Now this is a goal. When we start something, we should try to know what our objective goal is, whether it's a journey, whether it's a course of study, whether it's a work, whether it's a family, whatever it is, whether it's a spiritual path. What is our goal? What are we trying to achieve from this? So this is one of those type of verses. One should fix his mind on Krishna by any means. All the rules and prohibitions mentioned in the Shastras or scriptures should be the servants of this principle. That's the last word, eva kinkara. Kinkara means servants. All the rules and regulations, vidhi nisheda, they should be the servants of this one principle, to always remember Krishna, manak Krishna niveshayat, to always remember, fix one's mind on Krishna. So that is the objective goal of all the rules and regulations, that we remember Krishna. There's another similar verse. That verse was from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. There's a verse in the Padma Purana which follows a similar, you could say, a similar conclusion, at least, similar train of thought. And this is perhaps more famous. Smartavya tatatam vishnor, vishmartavyo najata chit, sarve vidhi nishedasur, etayor eva kinkaraha. Notice the last two lines are basically the same. In fact, they are the same, identical. So this verse is in Padma Purana. It states, Krishna is the origin of Lord Vishnu. He should always be remembered and never forgotten at any time. So these are the 2 points. Never forgotten, always remembered. All the rules and prohibitions mentioned in the Shastra should be the servants of these 2 principles. Same point. The goal, keeping that goal in life, we have to bear that in mind. And we hear many times Prabhupada himself emphasizes this, that if one's religious or spiritual progress is not developing one's love of God or one's remembrance of God, then what's the use? What is the value? Dharmas Vanishitak Pungsham Vishvaksena Katasrid no Pariyadi Vidin Shama Evi Kevam. The activities a man performs according to his position in society are only so much useless labor if they do not awaken our dormant love of God. Not really much value in it all. We work very hard and people are completely absorbed sometimes in what they're doing, convinced that this is the right thing to do. But ultimately there's no real value. It's a shrama eva, ikevalam. And sometimes people, or devotees, follow rules and regulations blindly or, just without effect, just become very attached to a, maybe some kind of, we call these days, comfort zone, sometimes of rituals or whatever it may be. There's an interesting saying I forgot to look at. Some of you probably know this. The spirit liveth and the letter killeth. It's oftentimes not very often quoted nowadays, but it used to be heard now and again. And what does that mean? The letter, what's it called? The letter of the law. You follow something, even if it doesn't work. And Prabhupada tells the story of a man. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj actually tells this story of this man and his family, and they have this well, which was called the family well, where they would all take their water. Everyone would take their water from the well. And their father said, we should always get our water from this well for generations. This is our family well. So similarly, all the children, grandchildren, everyone took the water from the well. The grandfather of the elderly man died in due course of time, and they continued to take the water from the well. However, the well became poisoned after some time, and everyone was getting sick. But still they insisted, we must take the water from the well, no matter, even though we're all getting sick and dying, which is our family tradition. We have to do it because that's the way it is. So like that, they all took this water, and then eventually, of course, realizing that this water is poisonous. So like that, sometimes we just follow because that's how we do things. That's the religion we're born in, even though we're not following the religion properly, at least, and we're not thus getting a proper result. Nonetheless, we do it because that's how we're supposed to do it. That's how everyone around me is doing it. But you have a little intelligence. So these two premises, you could say these two verses I quoted just now from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and Padma Purana are like premises to establish our goal and also as a check and balance to see where we're going. Obviously, you don't get the result before you start. It does take time, but there should be certain indicators along the path to see that we're going in the right direction. If we're not, we may have to check and see what's going wrong here. Not just follow and then fall over the cliff somewhere. You have to fix our mind on the goal. Am I achieving the goal? Are we engaged in the activities which are prescribed to achieve the goal, etc.? So if we just stick to the letter, we may miss the point sometimes. The letter is a very interesting letter, you could say, of guidance for spiritual life because it has many pages. But if we stick on one page, we're not going to get very far. We have to know where to go to get where we want to go. So let's see. Another interesting thing that sometimes now let's get to our reality of our ISKCON movement, the movement which perhaps all of us, I'm not sure, but all of us have embraced as a means to help us to awaken our Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada definitely gave certain rules and regulations, and we're going to discuss that a little bit more in a few moments. But he also asked, nowadays in most temples we follow quite a strong stricture regarding daily worship and so many different other rules and regulations relating to behavior and so on and so forth, all of which are very important and have their important part to play in our progress, in our purification, our regulation, and so on. But it's interesting, I just noted in 1976, Prabhupada wanted one of his secretaries named Nitai to compile the Hari Bhakti Vilas. which are the guidelines given by Sanatana Goswami and Gopal Goswami, the Vaishnava guidelines to follow according to the Vedic Smriti and so on and so forth. So he asked Nitai to do this, and Prabhupada said, he, Nitai, should make Hari Bhakti Vilasi into shortcut, not more than 20 pages. But the book is many, maybe 8 volumes or something. And Prabhupada said, not more than 20 pages. So he wasn't thinking that we were going to get like completely into it as if we're some kind of smarter Brahmins. They're very ritualistic Brahmins who are very hung up on, you know, how you click your fingers and how you do this and how many mantras you chant. And so many details are there. Sometimes we can get hung up with the details only and forget the goal. So Prabhupada didn't want us to forget the goal and the primary means to attain the goal, of course, Nam Sankirtan. But it was important, and these rules, and you can read them in Nectar of Devotion, a long list of rules in the worship of the deities or in devotional service. And as much as possible, one should try to follow these rules, but not to the point where it becomes detrimental to the purpose which in hand. Now, I'm going to now take, let's see, we'll go one little bit further here. There are basic approaches. I've just divided up into basic approaches this verse. We've heard, you could say, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada's purport just now, we heard a couple of different angles of approach. I was always a little tired this morning, but we just covered 2 angles of approach there. One was, which was accepting some things and rejecting according to one's own choice, so to speak, that which we like and that which we don't like. That's one kind, niyama agraha. And the other was, what was the other one? Remember what the other one was? Get my mind tired. Anyway, there were 2 there, nicely mentioned by Srila Prabhupada. Failure to accept. Well, the obvious one, to accept and not to accept. But I'm looking at these now in three other ways, on top of whatever we mentioned just now. So we mentioned that the 2 divisions of sadhana, Vaidhi and Raganuga. So primarily we're going to look at Vaidhi because that's the stage we're on. And Vaidhi, within Vaidhi, there are many divisions. First one we're going to look at is according to one's adhikar, one's eligibility. In other words, one's level of advancement in spiritual life. And according to one's advancement in spiritual life, there will be different rules and regulations. Or let's say emphasis is placed more on some of the rules and regulations than there is at a different stage. There may be none in the beginning other than chant Hare Krishna. And that was primarily what Srila Prabhupada emphasized in the beginning in 1966, when Srila Prabhupada started his mission in New York. There were not very, if any, rules and regulations. There were wearing beards and ordinary clothes, and maybe started to put on tilak and think about following the regulated principles if they wanted to. But the primary thing was chanting Hare Krishna. And Prabhupada said, rules and regulations we will talk about later. When he installed Jagannath Baladev Subhadra in San Francisco in 1967, the installation ceremony, to say the least, was quite crude by modern standards. Quite simple. It was just a matter of kirtan and waving a candle at Jagannath. Waving a candle. They were dressed in t-shirts and jeans and long hair and beards and whatever else the girls were wearing, etc., or not wearing. They were wearing something. But it was very crude and very simplistic. One devotee asked Prabhupada, is there anything more we should know in this activity of worship like this, Swamiji? Prabhupada said, there are so many things, but if I were to tell you, you'd faint. There's so many rules and regulations. So in the beginning, it's like a child learning his education. A child doesn't, generally speaking, have very sophisticated education to begin with. It's usually very simplistic, A and B, C, 1 + 1 = 2, whatever. Some method of trying to get the foundation of knowledge in a way the child can absorb it. So this is rules and regulations according to that. But one's expected to progress beyond the kindergarten of devotional service. And then one naturally, as Prabhupada saw, the devotees were eager to follow more rules and regulations. So then Prabhupada introduced the regulated principles and some more rules and regulations in deity worship and in behavior and dress, in cleanliness, and so many different areas, step by step by step. That doesn't mean, therefore, that the first set of rules and regulations, which were pretty simple, do not exist anymore. They still exist. It's not like Darwin's theory that it doesn't exist anymore or something, that species of life is extinct, gone. No, they're still there. It's just that that's a certain level of consciousness requiring that particular approach or that particular vidhi, rule and regulation. Simply chant Hare Krishna, take prasadam, like that. And then next stage, maybe regulated principles, chanting so many rounds and so on. And then more etiquettes and daily worship and so on. At different stages, one's practical in service of Vaidhi, Sadhana, Bhakti. There are different levels and different rules for different levels. So that's one. You could go on and on to the more advanced stage. There are different rules again. And if we read Bhakti Vinod Thakur, for instance, especially in the Jaiva Dharma, Chaitanya Sikshamrita, a little bit in Bhakti Aloka also, some of his writings, he emphasized the importance of progressing and not being attached to the neophyte platform, of not wanting to progress in spiritual life, but being attached to, lazy, you could say. It may be a symptom of laziness, it may be a symptom of attachment, it may be a social compromise. Many times people don't want others around them to advance in spiritual life because one tends to become less attached to material sense gratification. And that isn't what people want. They want us to become, they like religion, but they don't like spirituality. Religion accommodates material sense gratification in general, in a nice way, in a pious way. But spirituality means that one realizes that I have no wasting my time trying to enjoy material sense gratification. It has nothing to do. It's anartha-pashamam shakshat. It's superfluous to the soul. It has nothing to do with the soul as such. And that's why, with a little bit of realization, we lose interest in material sense gratification. So that's very displeasing to a materialistic person, family member or otherwise. So they often dissuade us from doing that and try to convince us otherwise. So it's not always so easy to make progress in spiritual life. There are many, many obstacles, and association is very essential to give us the strength to advance in spiritual life. So that's another kind of let's say, understanding of niyama agraha, that we remain attached for whatever reason to very childlike kindergarten rules and regulations, or practices, if it's not rules, practices in our lives, and not making the effort to go forward, to go deeper in spiritual life. And to go deeper, we have to have stronger faith, and that is based upon association. So taking association of more advanced devotees facilitates the growth of our faith. And as our faith grows, and naturally our eligibility or adhikar for more intensive kevalya bhakti vasudeva prayana, agamdan vatsikrat, more intensive devotional service develops, or let's say becomes accessible as we become more mature, or our faith develops stronger and stronger and stronger. And at that stage, then one respects religion, one respects the principles of neophyte principles, but one practices the principles which are more relevant or appropriate for one's level of maturity in spiritual life. Now that is guided by Guru Shastra Sadhu. We don't concoct it. That's not to be concocted. The Shastras give these definitions. We can see in Madhurya Kadambini, for instance, different stages that one goes through and the practices therein. So that's one division, according to one's adhikar or eligibility. Now, that's also divided into different areas. We have renunciates and we have householders, the two main categories. There may be many subcategories. And the details are different between it's like Hari Bhakti Vilas. Now we're going to come on to that. Maybe we can mention it now. Let's see. I'm going to just read something here. This is from Srila Prabhupada. Let me see this. This is a lecture he gave in Prayag at the Kumbh Mela in 1971. So it is very difficult nowadays to follow exactly all the rules and regulations. But His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada, because he is an acharya, he introduced that a sannyasin live in a palatial building. It may appear that he introduced something against the principle of the Goswamis, because our Gaudiya Vaishnavas, they are Rupanuga Viruddha Pasiddhanta Dvanta Harine. We pray for our spiritual master, Rupa Anuga Viruddha, everything which is against the principles of Rupa Goswami. Rupa Anuga Viruddha. Viruddha means against the principles of Apasiddhanta, against the Siddhanta. Such kind of conclusion. His Divine Grace was very much against such principle, against anything which is against the conclusion of the scripture. Now, whether it's a household or a grihasta, it doesn't matter. The conclusion, or a sannyasi, the conclusion of the scripture is the same, as we heard in the very beginning, to remember Krishna, to not forget Krishna. But one may say that the Rupa Goswami lived under a tree only for one night. Both the brothers also would not live together. They lived on their own. Sanatana Goswami would live somewhere, Rupa Goswami would live somewhere. They were following. Sometimes Rupa Goswami will invite his elder brother. In this way, they are living in Vrindavan. But does it mean that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami, instead of living under the tree overnight, he was living in Calcutta in a palatial building? So does it mean that he broke the principles of Rupa Goswami? No, that is Acharya. The Acharya has to make convenient means how people can get the principles. If Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami would not have introduced these principles, nobody would come to the principles of Rupa Goswami. In these days, nobody is prepared to go to Vrindavan and live under a tree overnight. That is a very, very difficult task. So Acharya's business is to see how people will take it. Then we're coming to a practical point, and referring to not just sannyasis, but to all aspiring devotees. First business is that, how people will take it. That is recommendation by Rupa Goswami. Yena tena pakarina manakrishnena visheshayat. Rupa Goswami recommends that according to circumstances, you find out means how people will take to Krishna consciousness. Sarve vidi vide nishevayat. Where am I? Sarva vidi niveshada suretayor eva kinkaraha. The vidi niveshada, the restriction, the rules and regulations might be introduced later on, which may serve as servants of our purpose. The rules and regulations are not goals in of themselves. They're meant to be means to assist us in our growth. Just like there are many different factors which assist in the production of grains. The factors to produce it are important, but they're not ultimately important. What is important is the production of the grains. So whatever is favorable to produce the grains, so to speak. Not that if you simply stick to the rules and regulations and forget the real business. No, that is called niyama agraha. We have to find out what is the suitable means to take to Krishna consciousness. Therefore, Rupa Goswami is worshipped. Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghu Yugo Sri Jiva Gopalako. Dira Dir Jajanopiyo Piyakarolis. Verses from about the 6 Goswamis. They adopted such means. They lived very, very simply. They studied, they produced literatures, etc., for the sake of not just one's own personal advancement, but a particular goal which was given to them by Lord Chaitanya, to present this philosophy in scriptural form, written form, which they focused upon in their lives. We have to follow the principles. How can we attract people to Krishna consciousness? That's the point. Some of you are in New Zealand, and in New Zealand we have the very first class example of Devarita Swami, who has attracted hundreds and thousands of young people to Krishna consciousness by following this principle of Rupa Goswami, of acting according to time and circumstances, that which is favorable for attracting others to Krishna consciousness. Not to follow stereotype rules and regulations and forget the real business of preaching the cult. It may have worked in this particular, the goal is the same. There's no change in the philosophy, there's no change in the goal. There's no change in the practice, maybe, but the means to inject the message of Krishna consciousness into others' hearts. Prabhupada was very flexible, and he said that the Acharya must be very dexterous in that regards. At all stages, whether it's because of the adhikar of the devotee, and that's why it states later in the Nectar of Instruction, you cannot progress beyond the level of one's spiritual master because they haven't got the adhikar to give us instructions beyond a particular level. So one has to take association to help us go further in general. Krishna can do anything he likes, of course, but that's the general principle. Acharya is he who adopts means by which people may be attracted to this Krishna consciousness movement. So the Acharya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as Acharya, introduced these all principles for the convenience of this age. And that is also recommended. Now that's another part of the Niyam Agraha, that what was appropriate in Satya Yuga or Dwapara Yuga or Treta Yuga may not be appropriate in Kali Yuga and vice versa. Or somebody may be hung up with following meditation or very, very deep, serious deity worship or whatever it is, without being able to follow it properly and missing the Yuga Dharma, Harinam Sankirtan, which is the primary instruction for Kali Yuga. So that's another form of Niyama Agraha. So many different forms that they're making, choosing which we like instead of what is actually the regulation appropriate. We can't, in our society around us, if we just choose which rules we like, that's not going to work, is it? Oh, I don't mind stopping at the red light, but I don't like stopping when there's a no entry sign. And we have to follow all the rules and regulations, otherwise we get in trouble. So, but those rules and regulations are appropriate. Well, you can say, well, 50 years ago, that wasn't the rule, so I don't care less. I'm just going to follow the rules 50 years ago. That doesn't work. You've got to follow the rules as they are, what works now. So similarly, in the preaching of Krishna consciousness, one has to be a little intelligent. And if we lack intelligence, then we have to be a little humble to follow somebody who has the intelligence to see what works and what doesn't work, to take advice. Or if not, I can't do that, at least to experiment and not to be stuck up in a poisoned well and getting nowhere. So our business is, as you have already adopted, that we should chant according to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's recommendation, Kirtaniya Sadahari. Kirtaniya Sadahari, 24 hours, we have to chant the holy names of Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And that's the Yuga Dharma. The beauty of the chanting of the holy names is no matter what age we're in, the chanting of Hare Krishna is appropriate. So now we're touching on number 2. The first one was according to our own eligibility, and because a very big subject matter which requires association of devotees to understand where we're situated and what is favorable. Within eligibility, now Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes or discusses quite length in Bhakti Aloka another aspect of eligibility, which is Varna Ashram or occupation. Varna Ashram, according to one's nature and according to one's ashram, person's nature. There are different rules for Brahmins, different rules for Kshatriyas, different rules for Vaishyas and Shudras, and for the Antyajas, the outcasts. Different rules are there. And we don't imitate the rules for another order of life. We have to know what is relevant for us and not step on the toes of those in other orders, either looking down on them or criticizing those who are more evolved. We have to know what is the rules for our own situation. That is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam as piety, one who is steady in the performance or practice of their own regulative activities is known as piety, steadiness in the performance of one's duties. So that's according to Varna. We don't have time to get into too much detail there, but there are certain rules. For instance, now in our ISKCON society, Prabhupada specifically said we're trying to train Brahmins. We want Brahminical head. Without a head, the body is aimless. There's pretty much, I was listening to a lecture this morning, Prabhupada said there's only belly and legs at most. There are no arms or head in society, no Kshatriyas or Brahmins. So at least he said we can try to train some Brahmins to give some guidance to society without Brahmins at the helm. we're not going to get anywhere. So that's the idea of our Krishna consciousness movement. But imagine today if Arjuna or the Pandavas were to turn up and say, I want to take initiation, we'd have to politely explain to them, you have to change your lifestyle. Because they're Kshatriyas, and as Kshatriyas, they're engaged in activities which are not always so Brahminical. Sometimes they take intoxication, sometimes they gamble, sometimes they have what we would term illicit sex, and sometimes they, what's the other one? Gambling, illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating. Sometimes they would eat things which we would not eat, especially in the forest sometimes. So like that, we say, no, sorry, Arjuna, you have to, change your lifestyle, boy. You're not ready for initiation. And if you want to sit down, we're reading the Bhagavad Gita right now. You can sit down and listen to the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna Uvacha, isn't it strange? So those are rules for Brahmins. Now, we may say, oh, I'm not a Brahmin, I'm a Kshatriya. What about me? Well, that's another thing altogether, which, again, that's another. Varnashram doesn't exist in modern society, practically speaking, in its original form. Eligibility may exist, or lack of it, but the Varnashram society is not in place. Nowhere on the planet is it in place. So without that being in place, answers to such questions as that are irrelevant practically. Everyone can come forward no matter what we are, since Kalo Shuddha Sambhava, we're born lower than Shuddha or less, and chant Hare Krishna. That's the Yuga Dharma only process in this Yuga, making one eligible for further stages, maybe to the platform. Bhaktivinoda Thakur goes into depth also. What's that verse? Kanchana Tamya Kamsyam. That by initiation, by a bona fide spiritual master, even an untouchable can become purified. And come to the level of proper initiation. And then by chanting Hare Krishna, one's heart becomes purified, no matter what one's situation is. So that's Varna. And then you have ashram, grihastas, vanaprastas, sannyasis, brahmacharis. The rules and regulations are different in each ashram also. Obviously, for a grihasta, there are different rules than there are for a sannyasi. Same with a brahmachari or vanaprastha. There's, you could go on all day just on each one of those. But there are different rules, and if we don't follow the rules appropriate to our particular ashram, that's niyama agraha. It's either taking what we want, following what we want, not following at all, etc., or just following fanatically. As a grihasta, one's trying to be a fanatic brahmachari, it doesn't work. One has to follow the appropriate behavior and the rules therein in order to progress to the next stage. So there are rules of ashram also. So that's within eligibility and in society. Then we have historic influence or historic situations. Well, that can come under time, place, and circumstance. So I'm going to read something now. This is from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 23:105. And this is a very interesting verse. Yukta varagya stiti sabha shikaila shushka varagya jnana sabha nishedila. Translation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then told Sanatana Goswami about proper renunciation according to a particular situation, and the Lord forbade dry renunciation and speculative knowledge in all respects. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, this is the technique for understanding Shushka Vairagya and Yukta Vairagya. Now, Shushka Vairagya literally means dry renunciation, and Yukta Vairagya is proper renunciation. In the Bhagavad Gita it is said, Yukta har viharasya yukta cheshtasya karmasu yukta swapnavabodhasya yogo bhavati dukkha. He who is temperate in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. And the yoga system, again, in yoga, there are different stages in yoga. There are niyamas, niyamas and yamas, do's and don'ts in yoga also. You don't start at the top. You have to go through the stages. And, when you reach the next stage, you practice at the higher level. In every activity, this is there, whether it's high jump, running, swimming, everything. There are different stages, and then the expectations are higher than they were at the previous stage. It's just how it is. So certainly that's the case here. But here, look, Krishna says temperate. Temperate means moderate, balanced, regulated, appropriate to one's situation, favorable, that which is appropriate, favorable. So that will vary again, according to one's situation. One's age is another consideration. What are different rules for different ages of a person's life? When we're younger, when we're older, obviously certain things change in all forms of one's activity, whether it's sleeping, eating, everything. It becomes slightly different as we age in life. So there are many different angles of looking at Nimahagga, knowing what is appropriate, knowing what is valuable to achieve our ultimate goal in whatever situation we're in. Now, a very important aspect now will come up, and that is time, place, and circumstance. To broadcast the cult of Krishna consciousness, one has to learn the possibility of renunciation in terms of country, time, and candidate. A candidate for Krishna consciousness in the Western countries should be taught about the renunciation of material existence. Because generally in the West, we're pretty exposed to no end of material sense gratification. And we become dependent almost on these various means of attaining sense gratification or techniques of achieving various material goals, etc. We become part of our life. We just accept it as norms. They're always changing in the course of history, but we become conditioned according to what space we are in history or in time. So to become detached, it's not we give them up, that we become detached from them, in a sense, not dependent. We utilize Krishna Sambandhe Yukta Vairagya Uchite to learn how to utilize everything favorably in Krishna's service. So modern technology, etc. Prabhupada describes length in some of his lectures how important it is. We use modern conveniences to achieve our goal of preaching. We don't reject them. Pretty revolutionary. We'll come on to that in a minute. And then Prabhupada goes on to say, a candidate for Krishna consciousness in the Western countries should be taught about the renunciation of material existence appropriately to the situation you're in. Not that we just artificially cut ourselves off, as Krishna explains in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, that he was chastising Arjuna who wanted to leave the battlefield. You're not ready for that. You haven't got the necessary adhikar consciousness yet for that. You're a Kshatriya. You've got to purify the heart first, and then naturally one can detach oneself. Through the proper, appropriate process of attachment, one can become freed of the attachment. And that's the whole Varnashram system, to gradually release the living entities from bodily identification, from me and mine, and entanglement in karmas and family life, and so on and so forth. But you can't do it artificially, we'll fall down. So it's got to be done in an appropriate way. So what is the proper renunciation according to you? If you're a grihasta, and if you're a sannyasi, what is the proper renunciation to help one to progress in spiritual life? What are the appropriate do's and don'ts in each and every ashram to help us to progress? And Prabhupada goes on like that. Yeah. But one should teach, and Prabhupada says, but one should teach candidates from a country like India in a different way. Now he's using countries, even cultures. Another aspect is cultures. When we look at the cultures of the world, so to speak, Africa, China, South America, India, and wherever else, Europe and so on, the nature, the conditioning is different. The attachments are different. The way that people respond to different things will be different to some degree. So take that into account as well in terms of what is appropriate. In many places, and people are not familiar with certain foods, for instance, they can't even take it. So little things like that may have to be adjusted. And then in other places, vegetarianism is the norm. It's not a very great sacrifice. They're already vegetarians. And in some places, it's all meat eating. So it varies according to the place, time, place, and circumstance. We've seen this in the course of history. When you're during Jesus Christ's time, for instance, everyone was a meat eater and practically living in the desert. There wasn't much else to eat. So it's understood that many of them were meat eaters. But this is the stage they're on. How to progress from that stage to a more evolved stage in devotional service or in spiritual life. So one should teach candidates from in a country like India in a different way. They're already supposedly already following these principles. The teacher, Acharya, has to consider time, candidate, and country. He must avoid the principle of niyamagraha. That is, he should not try to perform the impossible. What is appropriate? If you put too much into a person's mouth, he'll get indigestion. So if we do all at once, it's step by step by step, digest, and then we grow in strength and can progress. And then we can digest more and more. I mean, so many instances, that even poison. Prabhupada tells various stories, which I can't remember what it's called, but there was a poison, a lady who was given a little bit of poison as a baby, tiny piece, and slowly increasing, until her whole system was poisoned. And any boy or man she would kiss would die immediately, just by the kiss alone. Although she was okay, because she slowly become, accustomed to this poison as part of her system. And there are other instances like that. People's body is typhoid Mary, full of typhoid. It's a true story, by the way. It's they're just immune to it. They're just body's accustomed to it. We get accustomed. Practice. We become accustomed to anything by practice, practically speaking. So like that. But you've got to go step by step. Not you put 1 gallon of poison into your mouth all at once. Just a fraction drop of slow. I'm not recommending this, by the way. It's just as an example. But slowly. So not all at once. I'm trying to push everything down a new person's throat. Slowly, simple, something they can digest, something they'll be attracted by, something which will connect them, and slowly. What is possible in one country may not be possible in another. The Acharya's duty is to accept the essence of devotional service. There may be a little change here and there as far as yukta vairagya, proper renunciation, is concerned. Dry renunciation is forbidden by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And we have also learned this from our spiritual master, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj. The essence of devotional service must be taken into consideration and not the outward paraphernalia. Sanatana Goswami wrote his Vaishnav Smriti, which was called Hari Bhakti Vilas, which was specifically meant for India. Pretty profound statement. That's the Chaitanya Charitamrita. In those days, India was more or less following the principle of Smarta Vidhi, the Smarta Brahmins, the caste Goswamis, simply based upon Vedic rules and regulations without necessarily knowing the appropriate situation to apply them or effectively getting any beneficial result from therein, but just attached to it and being proud that I'm a Brahmin, I'm following this, I'm following pride. Pride comes in that regards. Srila Sanatana Goswami had to keep pace with this, and his Hari Bhakti Vilas was compiled with this in mind. So there's some important points there. According to time, place, and circumstance, we may have to educate differently, different persons from different cultures a little bit. And then certainly in terms of, this appropriate in countries and so on and so forth. The Hari Bhakti Vilas was specifically compiled for India, specifically. Prabhupada goes on, different things about this. It is not necessary that the rules and regulations followed in India be exactly the same as those in Europe, America, and other Western countries. Simply imitating without effect is called niyama agraha. Not following the rules, regulated principles, but instead living extravagantly is also called niyamagraha. The word niyama means regulated principles, and agraha means eagerness. The word agraha means not to accept. We should not follow regulated principles without an effect, nor should we fail to accept the regulated principles. What is required is a special technique according to country, time, and candidate. Without the sanction of the spiritual master, we should not try to imitate. This principle is recommended here. Shukshavaragya Gyan Sava Nishedila. This is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's liberal demonstration of the Bhakti cult. We should not introduce anything whimsically without the sanction of the bona fide spiritual master. That's another aspect, not that we just simply do something whimsically. We may have a good idea, but it's meant to be placed before the spiritual master, or at least placed before other devotees for their, discussion or whatever. Unless we're self-realized acharya, which we're not, then we should check things out, not just speculate about these things. Let's see where we go now. Okay, well, we leave that one. Yeah, maybe leave it. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 4th canto, 8th chapter, text 54 in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, those who are not actually in the line of acharyas, who personally have no knowledge of how to act in the role of acharya, unnecessarily criticize the activities of the ISKCON movement in countries outside of India. The fact is that such critics cannot do anything personally to spread Krishna consciousness. Again, back to the point, what is effective in spreading the purpose? The purpose is to be conscious of Krishna, to remember Krishna, to engage others in Krishna's service, to please Krishna. So what is effective in that regard? Krishna understands the situation in different places, the different conditionings, etc. And he's very pleased when he sees anyone chanting Hare Krishna, no matter what the tune, no matter what the pronunciation practically, if they're sincerely trying, and what instruments accompany the chanting. Krishna is pleased when he sees that we're genuinely trying to put Krishna in the center of our lives. So whatever is effective to achieve that purpose. If someone does go and preach, taking all risks and allowing all considerations from time and place, it might be that there are changes in the manner of worship, but that is not at all faulty according to Shastra. Again, there was a time when Prabhupada even said, yes, you could have Lord Jesus on the altar. In other places said, yes, you could have Buddha on the altar. Not that we do that anywhere and everywhere, but in certain circumstances, Prabhupada approved of these things. And he approved of so many things. But that wasn't the goal, it's just a means to the goal. The goal has to stay the same. The essential means of achieving the goal will be the same, but the details may vary. We become hung up on the details, we won't get very far. Neophyte philosophy. Srila Vira Raghava, Acharya, an Acharya in the disciplic succession of the Ramanuja Sampradaya, has remarked in his commentary that Chandalas, conditioned souls who were born lower than the Shudra families, can also be initiated according to circumstances. The formalities may be slightly changed here and there to make them Vaishnavas. The principle that only Indians and Hindus should be brought into the Vaishnava cult is a mistaken idea. There should be propaganda to bring everyone to the Vaishnava cult. The Krishna consciousness movement is meant for this purpose. There is no bar to propagating the Krishna consciousness movement, even among people who are born in Chandala, Malecha, or Yavana families. Even in India, this point has been enunciated by Srila Sanatana Goswami in his book Hari Bhakti Vilas, which is Smriti, and is the authorized Vedic guide for Vaishnavas in their daily behavior. Sanatana Goswami says that as bell metal can turn to gold when mixed with mercury in a chemical process, so by the bona fide diksha or initiation method, anyone can become a Vaishnava. Transformation of consciousness. Krishna consciousness, not Krishna activity or Krishna rules and regulations. No, Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness means awakening or developing the favorable consciousness for pleasing Krishna, whatever it is. Other things will come naturally, you could say. And okay, we're coming to the end. We haven't started actually on the commentary of Bhakti Vinod, but we'll leave that. Here's a nice conversation in London, 1973. Prabhupada says, stress on Sankirtan. Chant yourself, induce others, dance. Whole thing will be a success. And especially outside India, these rituals and ceremonials, that will be simply artificial. They cannot take it seriously. But Sankirtan they can take seriously. This is practical. And if you recite all the Vedic hymns throughout the whole day, and they will join, but they will not be benefit out. There will be no benefit out of it. They may join, but there will be no benefit, Prabhupada says. So why should we waste? Is that all right? That was in 73 in London. And the final one, this is just Satsrup Maharaj just reminiscing on 66 when Prabhupada started this, and we're going back to where we began. Another time, when Prabhupada was in his room in 1973, in Bhaktivedanta Manor, a devotee came up and reported that Pradyumna was chanting the Purusha Shukta prayers for the fire yajna. Prabhupada did not approve. He said, chanting Hare Krishna is enough. But because some of the smarter Brahmins will complain that this is a strange religion because it doesn't have enough reference to Vedic rituals. The Goswamis, especially Sanatana Goswami, described these Vedic rituals in the Hari Bhakti Vilas to satisfy them. Therefore, we have this fire, a few bananas and things, but keep it shortcut. I want you to keep it very simple and focus on the essence. The essence. And sometimes we miss the essence for all the details. And I will finish on one last thing here. Regarding that, Prabhupada said, these are all fanaticism. Real unity is in advancing in Krishna consciousness. Kalo nastyeva nastyeva. Kali Yuga, you cannot strictly follow, neither I can strictly follow. If I criticize you, if you criticize me, then we go far away from our real life of Krishna consciousness. And then Pushta Krishna asked, so is it correct to say that if we are not Krishna conscious, then it's not the Grihastha problem or some other problem, it will be something else? Prabhupada, yes, we should always remember that either Grihastha or Brahmacharya or Sannyasi, nobody can strictly follow all the rules and regulations. In the Kali Yuga, it is not possible. If I simply find fault with you and if you find fault with me, then it will be factional and our real business will be hampered. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has recommended that Harinam, chanting Hare Krishna mantra, should be very rigidly performed, which is common for everyone, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas. They should always chant Hare Krishna mantra, and everything will be adjusted. Otherwise, it is impossible to advance. We shall be complicated with the details only. This is called Niyama Agraha. I think I have explained it in the Nectar of Instruction. Niyama Agraha is not good. Niyama means regulated principles, and Agraha means not to accept. Agraha means the opposite. Agraha means the opposite. Too eager to accept the regulated principles, but no advancement spiritually. Both of them are called Niyama Agraha. So the basic principle is that Niyama Agraha is not recommended. If we advance in Krishna consciousness by the simple method of chanting 24 hours Kirtaniya Siddhahari, things will be automatically adjusted. You cannot find in Kali Yuga that everything is being done very correctly to the point. That is very difficult. Just like our poet, Allen Ginsberg, probably used to call him Ginsberg, he was always accusing me, Swamiji, you are very conservative and strict. Actually, I told him, I am never strict, neither I am conservative. If I become conservative, then I cannot live here for a moment. Conservative literally means this Niyama Agraha, actually, sticking to things just because you want to. So I am not at all conservative. I was living with that one boy, Carl Jurgens. I was cooking and I saw in the refrigerator some pieces of meat for his cat. So still I kept my food in that refrigerator. What can be done? Okay. Chant Hare Krishna. Okay, I'm going to finish there for today. And now we're open for questions. If you would like to ask anything, please feel free to do so. Please read the Nectar instruction very carefully. And this first 4 verses are the foundation for our growth in devotional service, especially in the stage of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Very important to invite them, apply them, and to understand them, and help us to become free of criticizing others who are following on a different level than we are, or other religions which have different injunctions according to time, place, and circumstances, etc. They all have their relevance according to time, place, and circumstance. Children, elderly people, different rules and regulations may be appropriate therein. So if there are any questions, please pop them up. Hare Krishna. There's a question, I think. Last Saturday, you were answering a question about reading different versions or editions of Bhagavad Gita. You told a story about a man who was attracted to a prostitute and she cooking food in different pots, gold, copper, iron, etc. Did not quite finish the story as you got distracted. Oh, okay, thank you for that. Could you finish the story how the prostitute pacified the man who was not satisfied with his wife? Yeah, we're never satisfied. This restless mind going from here and there. We get one thing and we want something else. We read one book and we want another. Oh, so this man was a cripple and he had a very faithful wife, but he was not happy. He was feeling lusty for this beautiful prostitute. His wife found out, so she thought, how can I satisfy my husband's desire? She served the prostitute faithfully. And then when the prostitute finally found out what she was doing, she said, what do you want? And the wife said, my husband wants to enjoy you. I'm hoping to attain your favor. And so she was a very expensive prostitute. So she said, because you're so chaste, I therefore accept your request. Bring your husband here. So she carried her husband to the prostitute, left her husband with the prostitute. The prostitute was a very sophisticated prostitute who used to cook in a very opulent meal before starting. And in this case, she thought, let me try to teach this man some lessons. Sometimes prostitutes are that's just their job. We hear Chintamani, we hear prostitutes in Dwarka and so on, who had profound effect on, say, enlightening others in Krishna consciousness sometimes. So this prostitute thought, I'll teach this man a little lesson. So she prepared the gorgeous feast. Some was in a clay pot, some was in a golden pot. And she asked, each preparation was in gold and each preparation was in clay. She said, I want you please now to taste a little bit from the gold pot, a little bit from the clay pot. Tell me, what is the difference? He took a little bit from the gold, a little bit from the clay, said they taste the same. Like this, tell another one. And eventually she said, so don't you understand? The actual pleasure you get, whether it's from a beautiful body or a beautiful container or an ugly container, is the same. It's the same ingredient. Inside the body, it's the same taste you get from the activity. So we try to understand. So in this way, we always thinking the grass is greener on the other side. But actual pleasure is inside, in our consciousness. Not trying to dilly and dally in this material world. Everything is there. Everything is there. Prabhupada warned very much. In fact, I was reading this morning, kind of, I don't know, it wasn't directly related, but Prabhupada was warning devotees about learning Sanskrit. He said he saw so many times, he approved it and he asked some devotees to do it, but many times a little knowledge and they start thinking they're bigger than the guru. They start getting so puffed up and proud. I've got this, I did this, I got this degree, I've done this, I've done that. Very dangerous and missing the point, missing the whole purpose of everything. Sometimes it can happen, not always, of course, but we have to be a little careful that pride doesn't come in, carry us away, or lust, or whatever it is. These enemies, greed, they can come in and sweep us away from our path in devotional service. We get cast out into the ocean again. And being very careful. So he realized his mistake and went back to his wife and say la vie, realizing that the real purpose of life is not just to enjoy name, fame, and prestige, or an audience, or followers, or wealth, or sense gratification of various kinds. but is actually to cultivate Krishna consciousness. Another question here. Oh my goodness. Here we go. I mentioned the goal is to fix the mind on Krishna by any means. Thank you. Reminding and inspiring us about book distribution, to take every opportunity to distribute Prabhupada's books. Great way to always remember Krishna. Well, Prabhupada said that whether we're making members or cooking or doing daily worship or book distribution, we try to remember it's for Krishna. Can we also say that we need to have a strong desire and that the arrangements will be made? Desire is awoken by association, so whichever way it comes, desire must be there. Sometimes it's placed upon us without our knowledge. That's good fortune. In the association of devotees, we're taking prasadam, we're chanting Hare Krishna, we're not even thinking about it practically without a strong desire it's going on. But in that association, that desire will strengthen, will grow stronger, and then Krishna will make arrangements to give us an opportunity to go further, for sure. I'm trying to distribute books. Thank you very, very much. Whenever I can, this evening after temple service, I stop to fill petrol. Dressed in Vaishnav dress, the young boy at the pay station asked, "Are you from ISKCON? I've been looking for the temple." Amazing, huh? After giving him the address, I asked him if he had a Bhagavad Gita. He said no. I ran back to the car. Knowing he was a university student, I said, "If you can please give a few dollars donation." He came back with $50. I always, Hare Krishna, nobody should go without prasadam, so the boy also got some Gaurni Thai Mahaprasadam. Thank you again. Hare Krishna, well, thank you. A beautiful example there of the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. I remember that reminds me of one time when I was in a town in France called Dijon. Dijon is a small city in France, and we were going to visit some devotees there. And we were reading Vaisheshika's book, Her Family Business, in the car as we were driving from one town to the next. And we just read a section where Prabhupada said, in that section, no Prabhupada say, Vaisheshika would say maybe, that we should always carry books and prasadam with us. You never know when the opportunity will come. So we arrived there, and the devotee was driving, parked the car. I got out the car, and suddenly I parked it in the street with mostly all Muslim shops. And this Muslim man came running towards me. I don't know what he was saying. Came running towards me. I thought he was going to attack us. I didn't know what's going on. He stopped. Hari, 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 Hari. He was going in front of us like this, Hari, Hari, Hari. And so I thought, this guy seems to be friendly. So I said, "Hey, give us some of that prasadam." So the prasadam was in the car, some cookies. I got a cookie out. Took the cookie, and immediately he was so excited, he dropped it on the floor, picked it up again, dusted it off, started eating the cookie. Said, "Hey," called his friends over. They all came over for cookies. And I asked him if he'd like to give a little donation. He pulled all of his money out, gave me all of his money. And we gave him all these books in Arabic, books and so on and so forth. It was just like spontaneous. But if we didn't have any prasadam or any books, it would have just been Ari, 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 which is also not bad. But it wouldn't be this. It was better that he took prasadam and books and gave a donation. So always be prepared. Anything may happen at any moment. Krishna will send someone along, just like he makes arrangements, as you just wrote in the previous one. If we have the desire, Krishna will fulfill your desire. Now, similarly, if you have books, you might distribute books. If you ever have looked at Vaisheshika's basic seminars or directives on book distribution, there are 4 basic foundational principles in book distribution. One is good sadhana. So you have some instrument for Krishna's mercy to, let's say, come through to the other person. That's one thing important to sustain also, as well as to have some potency. The second thing is, you've really got to have books. It's pretty hard to distribute books if you don't have any. I don't know if you ever tried distributing books when you don't have any. There have been times in ISKCON we've had no books and we've done other things. There was a time when devotees had nothing at all. They were just, "Hi there, we're distributing handshakes. We'd like to give a donation for a handshake," but that's nothing. That's not what Prabhupada wanted, although it was quite original, you could say, at least to try to engage people. But you can't do that right now with coronavirus anyway. But books, you have to have books if you want to distribute books. The second thing is, if you don't show the books, how people know? And people aren't going up to you, generally speaking, on the street. Excuse me, sir, do you have a book about Krishna consciousness? ISKCON book, especially, ever meet people like that? Very rare, maybe 1 in a million. Extremely rare, especially if you're not dressed in a dhoti. They're never even going to know you're Hare Krishna. You look like anybody else on the street. So that's never going to happen. So that's third one. You've got to show books. And fourth, you have to have organization. Sometimes they went for book to see who's got the key for the book. Oh, I don't know. I think they went off the holiday for the weekend. Anyone else got the key? No, I'm sorry. No books. Sorry. We haven't got any books. Someone comes to the temple. You got a Bhagavad Gita? Oh, no, we run out of stock. We haven't got any Bhagavad Gitas. Nobody ever asked for Gitas, so we thought no point getting them. You've got to be a little organized also, so that, knowing where we're going, and you're going on Sankirtan. But there's no prasadam. We're having a full day Sankirtan today, so sorry, there's no prasad for eating. I don't mean for distribution. And then what are you going to do? No one's going to go out. So a little organization is required to facilitate. So there are 4 basic pillars of foundational needs, you could say, of book distribution. So I recommend everyone take some books with you, even when you go to the supermarket, go to the doctors, wherever you go. You never know who you're going to meet. Petrol station, Lakshmi Priya just said petrol station. So wherever we go, take some books, and Krishna will reciprocate. In fact, book distribution, big book distribution started in a petrol station when the devotees went there. They didn't know how to distribute big books. They didn't have a clue. They were just stuck there in the room. They went to the petrol station one day to fill up, and they realized they had no money. So I thought, oh my goodness, let's see if the guy will take a Krishna book. And sure enough, in those days, petrol stations were a little more personal. They owned them. And so the petrol station guy took, I was like, okay, I'll take the book, you can have the petrol. And off they went. So the book says, I thought, oh, this is great. And they really got into it. And big book distribution started in this way. And somehow or another, try to distribute books. Hare Krishna. Here's another one. Do we get guidance from the Super Soul as to what rules and regulations are appropriate for the particular stage of advancement that we are at? Everyone's getting guided by the Super Soul. Super Soul manifests in others too, don't forget, not just in my heart. Krishna told me that I didn't have to follow the 4 regulated principles, actually. But he told me you did. So, we've got to be careful of that one. That's a little delicate. Certainly he does guide us. If we're really sincere, he gives us the intelligence, as he says in the Bhagavad Gita, I get the intelligence by which they can come to me. So he gives us that intelligence, but you have to be very sincere. There's always that risk. And even if we have that guidance, then we still check it with others. We don't assume that, that I am, divinely connected there without any interference whatsoever, purely connected to the Super Soul. And actually, the Super Soul, Krishna guides us to the association of those who can guide us. It's probably the external manifestation of the Super Soul. So devotees are to some degree or less, more or less, are external manifestations of the Super Soul to guide us in our devotional service. So Krishna works through others as well. You may have heard the story, another story of that man who was convinced the Super Soul is guiding everyone's wanderings. I don't have anything to worry about. He's looking after me. He's in my heart. Whatever happens, he's guiding me, walking down the street, very a little cocky. Suddenly there was a mad elephant running down the road with the elephant goad behind him. Stop, move out the way, mad elephant, out the way, move out the way, telling everyone to clear the path because the elephant's going mad. This man's thinking, I don't need to worry. Krishna's in my heart. He'll tell me to move out the way if I need to move out the way. And he didn't move. He just thought, I'm safe. He's in my heart. He's in the elephant's heart. It's fine. I don't have to worry. And bang, the elephant cracked. And the poor fellow was not flying. He ended up in the drain. And then he was groaning. What happened? And the elephant man in charge of the elephant came running up to him. Why didn't you move, you fool? And the man said, well, Krishna was in my heart. I thought he would have told me to move. And then the elephant man said, he's in my heart as well. And he was telling you to get out of the way, you idiot. So we don't get so proud he's only in my heart. We have to listen to others too and see. Certainly he's in our heart and he's teaching us lessons and inspiring us, etc. But we also have to check and see he is in others' hearts as well, not just ours. Well, that looks like it. Maybe one more. Oh, yeah. Hare Krishna thing. Yes. Hare Krishna. Well, I hope you can, wherever you are, whether you're in Australia, New Zealand, England, or Germany, or America, or France, Malaysia, or wherever you are, I hope we get a little Philippines, a little opportunity this month to try to please Prabhupada. Even if it's just one book, one magazine, or one effort. Krishna will be very pleased that somebody has got this little opportunity now to change their consciousness. Don't worry about the rules and regulations for them. Just some another Prabhupada said if they even touch the book, if they read one word, if they see the book, they're benefited. So try to show the books. If we don't show them, they're not going to take them. So try to show the books. Don't, well, it's easy to say don't. Try not to be too nervous or afraid. Krishna's in our hearts. He'll help us. They know people haven't got anything. We have nothing to lose. Absolutely nothing to lose by showing people books. And sometimes they snatch them. You may go, oh no. But even if they snatch them, okay, that's not a nice thing to do, but they still get some benefit. They still get some benefit. So if you get some books, maybe you can buy, if you can afford to, you can buy them off the temple and distribute them. Always try to make some other arrangement to distribute these books. Hare Krishna. Okay, thank you all very much for that little kirtan. And we're in full swing, as I said before, the devotees are on Sankirtan here in France, although there's a lockdown, we're somehow or another managing to get out there. Yesterday they distributed about 120 Gitas on the street in one day, about 7 devotees. And very nice. We try to do every day this month of December something for Prabhupada. Maybe you can, friends for Christmas, birthday. Gita Jayanti in many countries is the same day as Christmas Day. So it's a good day to, getting those books out to the Indian community, particularly, any community. But, they know Gita Jayanti, they know well. And for the Christians, it's Christmas Day. Christmas present for you, Srimad Bhagavatam said. Imagine receiving a Srimad Bhagavatam set as a Christmas present. Well, maybe if you've got some really serious friends you really like, you might like to do something like that. Or sign them up for a BTG sub or something. Somehow they get those books out. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Rama Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Go Premanande, Haribo, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Gaur Nitai ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki, Transcendental Book Distribution ki jai. Go Premanande, Hari Hari.
Hari
Bo.
Bol.
Hare Krishna, everybody. Haribo.
Hare Krishna Gurudev.
Haribo.
Haribo.
Haribo. Haribo.
Haribo,
Haribo.
Hare Krishna.
Actually,
Hari
what
Bol.
it has found that people
Hari
are
Bol,
more,
Vrinda.
they seem a little bit more
Hari
interested
Bol
in taking
Prema.
right now. They seem that people maybe they're starting to think maybe there's more to life than what we thought there is. So there's quite an interest in books right now. One of our devotees one devotee was here, went back to England, and he found it was better than ever distributing books in England right now. So take advantage of this opportunity. There's a good line, isn't it? What's happening in the world? Just see what's happening. We don't know what's going to happen next, you know. There's so much insecurity and fear and anxiety, huh? This book will help you to overcome all of these fears and anxieties and so on, insecurities. It helps you to go deeper into your, to spiritual life, whatever it is. Take advantage of it. Hare Krishna. Haribo! 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 Janananda Shivananda ki jai. Beat that drum. Hare Krishna. Haribo!
Haribo.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Ireland,
Krishna.
Philippines, Malaysia, Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, England, France, Germany, Holland, everywhere, America. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Haribo!
Haribo.
Hare Krishna. Haribo.
Haribo. Hare Krishna. See you later. Haribo. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.